Good afternoon, colleagues. Welcome back to some of you who were with us this morning. Again, just before I give some words of welcome, I'd just like to remind you that we're really pleased to have closed captioning on the session this afternoon. And as I hope most of you can see, we've also got some sign language interpretation as well. The sign language interpretation should, always be on screen for you. There are a few options with regards to the closed captioning, and you can find more information about those in the chat as well. So welcome back, everybody, and I'm delighted that we're moving into something that's become a bit of a feature of the Safer Internet Forum over the last few years, and it's the deep dive sessions. So those of you who were here this morning will know that we talked in great detail with a lot of young people, with a lot of experts, with a lot of colleagues from industry about some of the challenges, the opportunities, the issues facing children and young people who go online with specific disabilities. And the session this afternoon is going to look at how industry and non-profits are developing resources and platforms to meet the needs of those children with disabilities. And I think we'll try and talk about whether the digital environment is as inclusive as possible, and whether perhaps reporting tools and ways to customize platforms and online experiences in general are accessible to all. So we've got two parts to the deep dive this afternoon. We're going to be hearing, first of all, from David Clark and Steen Storm, who are going to talk about some of the Lego initiatives. And Dave is also going to sort of talk about some of his personal observations and experiences around technology. And then we're also going to be hearing from colleagues at Facebook, who will talk about some of the work that they're doing to make their platforms accessible and inclusive as well. Now, I'm hoping that you've had a chance to look at the biographies of all the speakers, and I'm not going to go into them in great detail. But just as I introduce David Clark, I think it's really important to say that, despite all the amazing work that he's doing as Director of Services with the RNIB, and that is the Royal National Institute of Blind People, he's also had a career as an international footballer, where he represented Great Britain on the England blind football team 144 times. Scoring 128 goals. And I just think that's absolutely right that we mention that. So, David, it's wonderful that you can be here. I've had a few conversations with David over the past few weeks, and I find them absolutely fascinating. I could listen to them all afternoon, so no pressure, David, but we're going to hand over to you, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Carl. Just checking that everyone can hear me okay.
Yeah, really good, David. Thank you.
Super. So thank you so much for allowing me the opportunity. As Carl said, my name is David Clark. I am Director of Services at the RNIB. I've been at the RNIB for around 2.5 years now. I have congenital glaucoma, so I've been totally blind since birth, other than some very early light and colour perception. But actually, before that, my career was in financial services. So I spent 24 years in financial services working for 3 global banks within the UK. So I guess in sort of professional capacity, I've 2.5 years to run the services directorate within RNIB. But I guess, that's somewhat influenced by my experiences over what I now have to say is 50 years. So thank you for mentioning the football, Carl, but a bit of a distant memory, London 2012, I have to say, which was when I retired. And it's fair to say I've made the most of the last 8 years. So in terms of my sort of background, I was sort of diagnosed with my sight loss condition when I was around 2 years old, although I'd had it since birth. Went through a specialist education and moved into mainstream education when I went to university to study politics in Manchester, and then moved on to Lancaster University to study diplomacy and international relations. And that was my first experience of kind of mainstream education. And then, of course, moved into the workplace. And I think, it's interesting to hear some of the feedback given this morning, because in many ways we've moved on, and I will come to that. We've moved on technologically, we've moved on culturally. I think the discussion I have on a day-to-day basis is a very much more positive one. But where perhaps we haven't moved on is in getting the societal and the commercial reality of sight loss, and how that fits in with corporate strategies and product design and building design, and that equally applies to the internet. In terms of my role in RNIB, I look after sort of two real strands of work. One is around information and advice and guidance, and that's anything from iClinic liaison officers within hospitals, following a diagnosis, helping people work through how to live the life they want to lead, and an information service around that called the Sight Loss Advice Service, which is a mixture of digital, telephone, and face-to-face programs and services to help people, as I say, decide how they want to live life, and to make a plan and to use those resources to do that. The other side of it, which is perhaps a little bit more relevant in many ways to our conversation today, is around products and services, in terms of our reading services, our product and product design, and how we work with third-party corporates, and then also how we enable companies to fulfill their requirements in terms of accessibility, for example, by providing accessible documentation such as bank statements, bills, and all those lovely things that land on your doormat that you don't really want to read, but you have to read to stay financially independent. And so that opens up a huge sort of number of challenges. And I'm also conscious that kind of many of these things we do are just perhaps touching the surface of this. And that's why it's great to have this short opportunity to kind of explain where we're at with this and the kind of thing that we're looking at major corporates and governments and anyone with a piece of this pie, really, to think differently and to think about customers in a different way and think about users in a different way. The COVID situation, which of course we are all suffering with, and hence this online discussion today, has actually in many ways increased the issues associated with particularly digital information and internet-based information, but also information per se, and access to products and services. Just a couple of examples of research that we've done. 66% of blind and partially sighted people we surveyed felt less independent as a result of the coronavirus. And why did that happen? Well, if I told you that 50% of people also reported that they were worried about access to food, it gives you an example of how some systems are built, but they don't necessarily take into consideration the user. And it was quite interesting and a real kind of light bulb moment for me when I realized that many supermarkets, for example, had no idea about how blind and partially sighted people were using their resources, such as online shopping, to get hold of food. And so I think when that was taken away, that caused huge anxiety. And of the research we were doing, 1 in 5 people were actually food rationing. Now, if you can imagine, 20% of respondents were food rationing. Again, something that we never ever thought we'd be talking about. So why is that important, and why has that been particularly important during the pandemic? Well, I think the reasons are, for example, that you will have seen much information shared around keeping safe during the pandemic, what you should do, what rules to follow, the level of disease local to you, and an amazing amount of that information has been provided graphically and has been provided through pictures and shared images. And when I get hold of my iPhone and I try and read something like that, it just says image, unless you have used alt text or you've added some additional features to make sure that message gets across. Now, within the timescales, obviously, I'm going to be fairly limited on how I can speak about some of these examples and how others have embraced it. And I'm really looking forward to Stina coming on and talking about sort of one way in which this has really been thought about. But it's clear that there needs to be a change in thinking about how one addresses an audience. That otherwise, what you will find is that critical information will not get into the hands of people who perhaps in some cases need it most. Another example in my own personal life was that a rail company recently introduced a fantastic system, which meant that I didn't need to go to a counter, I didn't need to go to a ticket machine, which by chance were inaccessible anyway to me, but I could actually use a smart card to travel with. And this was going to be, a real game changer for me, particularly, as I say, during coronavirus, where touching and feeling things is a bit more of a challenge. But lo and behold, what had happened was they'd introduced a system, but they hadn't thought about the fact that firstly, it needed to be accessible. And secondly, something like a disabled rail card, which is a discount card in the UK for people with disabilities, needed to be added to that system. And it took a whole year after pointing that out for the system to actually change. And now I'm delighted to report that that particular system is now up and running. But again, this gets back to the point about thinking about customers. Another example of a real positive change we've started to see is around, I have two young sons, and when they come back from school, the first thing they would tend to do is, of course, their homework, because they're good boys and they get brought up right by their dad and their mum. But then straight onto the PlayStation, straight onto the Xbox, and that's when a whole new community is opened up. Now, for many years, that was not accessible, like people like me. Now, as I said, I'm 50 and I should be getting on and doing other things. But, I remember many times from my childhood when technology was nowhere near as advanced, feeling completely locked out of information, of things to do for fun, of games. And it's always been a bit of a strain to me that in many ways has continued. Now, again, I'm really pleased to say that has been taken on board, and a number of things are changing, and particularly around gaming, there is lots of activity going on, and now it is possible through talkback mechanisms, both on the Xbox and on the PlayStation, that at least one can be involved in that community, in that, because kids kind of chat, they play, they set teams up, they do all sorts of things, and it's brilliant to see the progress. And hopefully at some point we'll see that progress moving into the actual gaming itself, and in many areas we have. But I think, why is that happening? And that's happening because the companies behind those products are understanding the importance of inclusivity. They're understanding the importance of not locking out an audience. And particularly when you think about it, why on earth would you commercially lock out a young audience who are going to be your future users and your future customers, and they're going to be talking about your brand and they're going to be talking about your business? The last thing that I imagine commercial companies would want to hear is that they're talking about your brand negatively, or taking some form of legal action, or doing something because it's not accessible. So that's kind of the stick element of it. But the carrot, I think, commercially, for private companies and for public authorities, is the impact it can have, and how people can talk positively, and how people can interact with each other seamlessly. And I think we've seen that in a number of different areas. I mentioned that one of the main ways that one of the main areas of my focus at RNIB is around products. And we have seen more and more companies willing to work with us in partnership. The old traditional model of a UK charity was almost a dependency model, where the charity would pick up the pieces where society had decided that it didn't really care, or it didn't have the desire to go and find a solution. So the role of the charity in many cases was to actually find a solution. And we've been doing that successfully for years. In fact, RNIB has been going over 150 years. But what's starting to change, and change quite significantly, is businesses reaching out to us to partner to decide how we can best include from the beginning. This has happened particularly through the tech companies who are reaching out to us in terms of reading and digital reading and EPUB and all those areas that can be made accessible from a point of view of reading. But we're really starting to see it now in terms of product. And I'll just give you a few examples. Talking about access to internet and talking about access particularly through smart televisions. The latest range of the Samsung television, as an example, and Sony are another exponent of this, is completely accessible from a blind and partially sighted point of view. Every aspect of it speaks, program guides, individual apps, all the basic functions, setting it all up from scratch, connecting it to other devices, everything is spoken. And I have to say, it was a eureka moment for me when I first switched it on and realized that partnership and that sort of work had just made a huge difference to my experience of using a smart television, and it made a huge difference to everybody. And the other thing was, it was right across the range. So it wasn't a very expensive, it wasn't a very special model, it was right across the range. And I think the most unique thing about that is what Samsung told us was that work, which received our tried and tested accreditation, had actually made the customer experience better for everyone. And I think that's a critical thing. And if commercial brains out there listening to this, it wasn't just for visually impaired customers. It made the experience better for everyone. We've also worked with Miele on a washing machine. No longer will I be able to make the excuse that the dial just keeps going round and round, and that's why I can't use the washing machine. And that was a brilliant example of coming together and working out how we could come up with a solution that, again, was fit for market for everybody, but specifically bore in mind the needs of blind and partially sighted people. And that's now reached the market. It's now out there. It's normally priced. It's accessible, and it can be used by blind and partially sighted people. I could go on. We're working on launching a DAB radio very shortly. That's a similar principle. We've recently launched a talking microwave. That's the same principle. And of course, there's a whole host of connected kit now that hasn't had our involvement at all, but by its very nature, it's accessible. My latest acquisition is the good old robotic vacuum cleaner, which can be controlled from an iPhone or an Android phone, and enables me to sweep up and to have full control over that device. Now, for me, this changed in about 2009. Previous to that, I felt locked out. I know many people felt locked out of technology. It was very expensive. It was very specialist. There were some brilliant, and there still are, brilliant accessible technology providers who have worked so hard to bring the costs down and to integrate with everyday equipment. But for me, my life changed with the introduction of the smartphone and the fact that it had voiceover or it had talkback on it, which meant if I needed to find what platform I wanted, or to scan and read a document, or to know where I was in the street, or I needed to buy some theatre tickets, or I needed to read a book, it all happened within my smartphone. And again, that is because from the very, very beginning of the design and build process, that was considered. And there was an overt action to include the entire audience and not to exclude anybody. And as I say, as a result of that, touch screen came in. It was a real concern for blind and partially sighted people, but the way it was addressed was unique and incredibly positive. And it's had a huge impact on people's lives. So for me, this is a commercial imperative to get your people to be thinking about what a customer is, who is in their head, what kind of a person are they thinking about? How is it being inclusive? How can you make sure that people can can play together, can enjoy entertainment together, can work together. You know, the recent advances in keyboard shortcuts and all sorts of things, from various things from Teams to Zoom to all those kind of things, have made these things inclusive. They work for blind and partially sighted people, and it's been possible to interact on an equal basis. And now I want to pass over to Stina Storm from Lego Foundation, because this is one of the most amazing things I've ever been involved with. I have played with Lego, I'm not embarrassed to say, pretty much all my life, naturally, particularly in my younger years. But it has been just a dream to work on the most recent project over the last couple of years that Stina has been leading on. And one of the things that's critical, to use all the things I've spoken about, and to be able to move forward successfully in life and live the life you want to lead. What lies at the very heart of that is numeracy and literacy, which is gained in very early years. And whilst the technology can assist with that, there are some very basic items that come from within the classroom, but also with play. And so I won't say any more, but hand over to Stina, who can pick up on the project we've been working on together over the last couple of years with the Lego Foundation.
Well, thank you, David. Well, David, I'm happy to say that it's never too late to play and learn. So you can continue learning throughout your life. And at the Lego Foundation, we strongly believe in learning through play. So all our projects and activities are around learning through play. So I'm here today to tell you about two examples, one of which we've worked with RNIB and several other blind organizations. One of the projects is digital and the other is a combination of analog and digital. Next slide, please. So the first example we call Lego audio instructions. It's developed through co-creation, because at the Lego group in general, we are very much engaged with our users, and we have several forums where we listen to their ideas. So this idea came from a young gentleman in the US who asked Lego to, how can I say, make all our building instructions accessible for the blind. So we've been trialing this project over the past couple of years, and I'm pleased to say that there are now several building instructions on this website called legoaudioinstructions.com. So you can go in there and, of course, get access to these instructions, which are very easy to follow on audio. And to David's point earlier, I think building solutions that are good for, in this case, blind people, can also be good for other people with other kind of learning disabilities or challenges. So the next example I'm going to tell you a bit about is Lego Braille bricks. Next slide, please. We again did not come up with this idea, but as you can see from my slide here, Braille is a 6-dot system which resembles a Lego brick. So of course many blind organizations have come to us over the years saying, you know, please can you put this into production? It's not as easy as that. We of course need to anchor this project somewhere in the organization, and happen to land in the Lego Foundation. Whoops, sorry, the light just went out. And I had the pleasure of working on this project together with many different blind organizations. Now, I'm going to show you a little video because I think videos explain much quicker and easier. And for those of you who may be blind, I'm pleased to say that there is a transcription of the video on our website, which I will show in a little while. Please show the video. Oh, I have one more slide before that. Sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
Stina, I'm just going to interrupt. It's Carl here. There should be sound on this, shouldn't there?
Yes, but don't worry.
So, well, I think we can easily sort it out. I think I'll just say to my colleague in the tech side, this is something we were experimenting with. I think if we come out and then when we share again, we need to click the little box that says share computer sound. And once we do that, I think it's important that everybody can hear. And we have time, Stina. I'm sorry to interrupt. I just
No worries.
want to make sure that we get it right.
Children learn Braille and to engage with the process of Braille.
Children dislike making mistakes. If you're using a Braille machine, your mistakes are there, written large. Children love being able to make something, unmake it if it's wrong, and make it again. And that is the important thing that Braille Bricks does. And it is making mathematics, English, Spanish, French, literacy far more accessible than it ever was before.
At the moment we've just been multiplying, dividing,
Including
the
decimals,
and decimals,
which is quite challenging.
very challenging. Hundredths, tenths, units.
I mainly use the bricks in Spanish. It's given us another tool to explore learning languages. And Paige, you enjoy it, right? Yeah. Muy bien. Y finalmente.
Gracias. It's different from anything I've done before, and especially with younger students, I think it helps them to fiddle and play.
It's having something tangible that you can rearrange in so many ways.
It's ridiculous that all it does for us really is give us convenient access to moving letters around, but that opens up so many doors, and that's a wonderful thing.
Lego Braille bricks make learning more fun. I gave them to my students just to see how they would get on with them. Couldn't get them off them. We spent the whole lesson making up games and playing with them. It was just such an engaging and fun time.
78.
Spot on. Spot on.
Got it.
Spot on. Using the Braille bricks yesterday, I saw that moment when a child actually has properly understood something, and we know what it feels like ourselves when it finally clicks into place and we say, yeah, I've got it. When you see that in a child, that is what keeps teachers going. High five.
So this is a lovely little video which shows how the children are really enjoying this process of learning through play. But although you just see mostly visually impaired children in this video, what makes this concept so beautiful is that it's inclusive. And we've done this by adding print to the bricks. Potentially, Carl, we can show the overview that I just skipped before.
Yeah, I'm sure we can go.
Yep.
Yeah.
This is it. So this actually shows how you can actually teach Braille in a mainstream classroom with both visually impaired and sighted children. And at the Lego Foundation, this is where we believe the magic happens. This is, you know, in this instance where children are communicating and collaborating and developing skills, you know, that help them problem solve and, you know, come up with solutions and creative thinking. And this is what we wanted to promote and why we believe this, this project was so important. So with the help of many blind organizations, we have tested it in several countries. The complexity I mentioned earlier is that every single toolkit is different because of the language differences. So Carl, if we skip a couple of slides now, I want to show you what a toolkit actually looks like today. So this is the analog, if you can say it, toolkit that goes with this concept, Lego Braille bricks. And it's very visual, very colorful, very iconically Lego. And we've done this purposely to make it inclusive so that also sighted children can, you know, can recognize Lego and the joy of playing with Lego. And for a blind and visually impaired child, it shows how Lego and Braille can open up a world of experiences. So with that, we've designed a pedagogical concept. If you go on to the next slide, that we've made totally open source on a website, legobraillebricks.com. And this site is accessible. It's WCAG accredited by the RNIB, who worked with us to ensure that anyone can access this site. Every single feature is accessible. But what you have on here is, of course, all our theory and our, principles around learning through play, but they're put into some very simple, easy to use activities with children, both to develop their pre-Braille skills, but also Braille skills. So we're very proud of this concept, but it's definitely a joint effort, and it's been an absolute pleasure working with all the different stakeholders to bring this to market. So we're now currently in 20 countries within the coming months, and we hope to expand to many more in future. But follow us on legobraillebricks.com.
David, thank you both so much for that. I think there was such a lot of information there, and I think it's so inspiring, really, to see how something can be created that just gives that joy, that access to so many more people. And it was interesting, obviously that this is the Safer Internet Forum, and traditionally we talk about online safety issues and how to protect children and young people and help them to, reap the benefits of what is online. And we often talk about things being, safer by design. And I think colleagues from industry are very familiar with that sort of concept. But, especially listening to what David was saying there, I think this idea about inclusivity by design and accessibility by design. So rather than creating these products and then having to go back and think, oh, how do we make that more accessible? I think great to be able to sort of build it in so it's part of the DNA almost. We have time, colleagues, so there's over 100 people on the call, which is brilliant, and I think testimony to how important people think these issues are. Please do ask questions. We have the chat facility, we have the Q&A box there. David and Stina are here and they're able to answer questions, whether it's about the process or about the product, but we do have a few moments if there are any comments or questions. I've certainly shared the link to the audio instructions in the chat there, Stina, as well, and we'll make the other things available as well.
Carl, perhaps while we're waiting for questions, if I could just say something about audio description, because I think that's a really good example of what you've just spoken about. It's quite interesting. We did some work recently where we looked at about audio description, within television adverts, and that's a great example of something that's quite actually difficult to retrofit. Because putting an audio track over something that's overtly visual without thinking about that from the start is a really difficult concept, although it's great that some companies have gone and done that. But one of the things, for example, at RNIB we've been really pushing for last year and this year is, I don't know about in other countries on the call, but in the UK, Christmas adverts are really quite important. And it's been brilliant to see two things this year. One is lots of companies building in audio description tracks from the very start to allow visually impaired children and adults to really feel that advert and what's going on in that advert. But a couple of brands have actually built the advert around inclusivity. So there is no need for an audio description track because the way the advert has been thought about, created and produced has built it all in. And I think that's a really interesting change in approach that hopefully we'll see more and more of.
Thanks, David. Yeah, as you say, that they're a huge thing, aren't they, in the UK? And I hadn't realised that had been done this year, but that seems to be a huge step forward. I suppose it would be interesting to know. I mean, it's great that they did it, but to know why they felt they needed to do it, and hopefully it was a recognition of being inclusive. And
yeah, well, I think this probably reaches for another point, really, that there are very few areas of business particularly and service providers particularly who are overtly, deliberately not inclusive, if that's not too many double negatives. However, there is a lack of awareness and there's a lack of know-how. And I think that's where we've certainly been working very, very hard, is to, I mean, something like the Christmas advert campaign, for example, is to firstly bring that awareness that we actually want to enjoy these adverts too. And secondly, let people know how they can do it.
Yeah, thank you, David. We've had a couple of points raised in the chat as well, and one is a very specific one from June at the Commission, asking, you know, how many languages are Braille bricks available in?
Yep. Well, June, a good question. Right now, it's available in 11 different Latin-based languages, and we're hoping, of course, over time to expand to many more. As I said earlier, the complexity is quite huge, and the master data in the system to be able to produce it and pack correctly it takes some time, not least to find the right partners in these countries to actually work with them to disseminate the teaching method, as we've done with RNIB in the UK and many other blind organizations across Western Europe.
Thank you, Stina. And there's another comment here, David, which goes back to your sort of comments about the adverts. And again, June is saying, could you perhaps name some names about examples of the inclusive adverts? I know that you weren't doing that just before, but actually, you know, it would be good to know which ones it was. And June says that so much depends on the awareness raising, possibly even more than the tech skills.
Yeah, so I think M&S is one of the ones that Marks and Spencer's is one of the ones who've just built it in, you know, into their programs. But we've been working with brands such as John Lewis, such as Amazon. Many of you may have caught, if you were in the UK, may have caught the Amazon advert that wasn't a Christmas advert that demonstrated the power of Alexa with a blind person. And again, it's just really good to see companies embracing this and not only doing it to include, but also realizing that ultimately it's good for their brand and good for their products.
Thanks, David. It's interesting that this morning in the panel discussion, we had a colleague from Microsoft. And one of the things that she was saying was that on their team that they had this particular gentleman with a specific disability. And they said it was only when they started talking to him that they realized some of the barriers that were there that could quite easily be taken away. And I was chatting to her before, you know, in the sort of preparation last week sometime, and she said, you know, that this particular chap had said, look, you know, I actually find it an awful lot easier doing all of these endless Zoom calls and Teams calls that we do, because he has a hearing impairment. And he said, you know, if you're in a meeting room, people are rude and they talk over each other, and it's very, very difficult, you know. But actually here, everybody is speaking into a microphone. That there are some kind of unwritten rules that we're all, you know, obeying now, and it actually makes it a lot easier. So there are so many sort of juxtapositions, I guess, with all of this.
Yeah, I mean, I touched on it during my speech, and it's difficult to name everybody, but the fact that the main systems that are used in business and in the classroom have accessibility at the heart of them now, and you know, as I said, the major tech companies have made huge commitments and continue, you know, to plow lots of energy into improving the experience, but you know, it does make such a difference. And to your point around, you know, the use of Teams or Zoom, one of a totally blind colleague said to me that actually he felt a greater level of parity in a meeting now, actually, because whereas previously people were able to perhaps read the room and notice nods and winks and all sorts of body language, he felt that actually Teams equalised the playing field somewhat. So that's quite an interesting take on it.
Wow, yes, thank you. I think it's fascinating. I think we just have to spend more time, you know, giving consideration to all of this. The other thing I'll just share, because you mentioned, David, about the I think it was the tickets, the train tickets, and again a comment was made that as part of the EU Accessibility Act, all travel ticket sales should be accessible by default by the time we get to 2025. However, we're not sure, obviously, if the UK will implement that, is the comment that was made.
Yeah, I'll probably steer well clear of that topic. But yeah, I mean, you know, it was a really important point to me that the only way I could purchase a ticket at times was to go to a counter that was actually often shut, because, you know, they don't they don't stay open the full hours that the railway's open. So effectively, I was being forced sometimes to get on a train without a ticket, which technically is a criminal offence. So it's putting you in a very, very challenging position. And then, as I said, because of coronavirus, to be putting your hand across touchscreens and all that kind of stuff is actually quite a dangerous thing to be doing. So, I mean, they eventually got there, as I think, that legislation will hopefully do. But it's really interesting. The carrot and stick, which I touched on, is a really interesting kind of balance. There have been huge changes made, such as with audio description, actually, that have started with a stick and ended with a carrot. And it's the dynamics of that are quite interesting. And I think the way to prevent too much stick and a bit more carrot is to explain, as I try and do whenever I talk about this, the commercial advantages, because there genuinely are, as well as some real social advantages, which are starting to come much more to the fore within the minds of business leaders and business owners, in terms of what the kind of culture, the kind of outcomes that inclusivity drives.
Thank you, David. I think you're talking an awful lot of sense. Why would you cut out a huge sort of part of your market like that, or your customer base? And as you say, that I think earlier on you said that they're the ones who are going to be, advocating for your product, hopefully in the future as you move forward.
Absolutely.
There's one last question, and then we probably will move on. But again, this is from June, and by the way, June says, other people are allowed to ask questions, and you absolutely are. Although we're really grateful to June for her insights, and given the fact that we've spent a lot of time, quite rightly, I think, talking about children and young people, she says, does RNIB have a youth section, a youth panel, and if so, what are their main concerns or their wishes?
Yeah, so our particular area of expertise when it comes to children, young people and families is around the classroom experience. And one of the things we've got very involved with is training qualified teachers for visual impairment. And one of the things we have just launched is what is a 2-year sort of research program into the visually impaired curriculum. I think there are huge opportunities within the classroom at the moment. A lot of that is around the use of digital, but that can't be assumed in terms of affordability or in terms of access or in terms of the specific eye condition. But I think it's quite interesting that the level of support that children require in the classroom is often thought about in terms of quantity as opposed to quality. And I think I see the possibilities for that support needing to be very, very limited if we can deploy technology in a way so that you can imagine, for example, a teacher stood at the front of the class about to put some stuff up on a whiteboard or to show a screen of information, and that information can simultaneously be zapped to a handheld braille display or a handheld large screen with large or giant print on it that makes it accessible at exactly the same time as it is for everyone else. Because the beauty of what Stina has presented today is the fact that this is a joint solution for everybody within the class, whether they have a visual impairment or they don't. They learn literacy, they learn numeracy, and they learn how to play and how to learn through play, whether they have sight or they don't. And I particularly think that there are huge opportunities within the classroom. So that's our focus. Our focus is to continue that journey and to ensure that the education gap, which still exists sadly for blind and partially sighted people, continues to be closed, because then that leads on to employment opportunities, financial independence, social independence, and quality of life.
Thank you, David. I think it's about working smarter, isn't it, with what's already there. That's really important. Thank you. And Stina, I think we have one final question, which we can go across to you. This is from Manuela from the European Commission, asking about, what is the main benefit that you could gain from the Braille Bricks initiative, and what was the main challenge perhaps that you had to overcome in the process?
Well, to David's point about the carrot and the stick, isn't it more fun to be proactive than reactive. And the joy that's come of this project and the pride internally in the Lego group is amazing, because we want to do good. And there is absolutely no financial benefit here to us at all. On the contrary, it's been a huge investment. But it has given so much in terms of, yes, pride, but also you can say we've opened up some doors and put some things on the agenda which are important not just to us but to others as well. So it opens up partnerships, you know, even more ideas. This project is actually led to even more projects to build on it. So now we're actually adding on even more digital components to try and go into the area of STEM, using Braille bricks to do coding, for instance.
Thank you, Stina. It's such a positive way to I think, end this first part of the session. I think it's such a good news story, and I hope people will be able to sort of keep in touch. As you say, well, they'll have to sign up and follow, you know, what happens moving forward. Stina and David, if I can thank you both, I'm sure there's a huge virtual round of applause being given, because that was perfect. It was a great way to start the session. So thank you both for your time and for your expertise.
Thank you very much.
Thanks both. So what I'd now like to do, colleagues, is to move us into the second part of this session, and we're going to go to colleagues from Facebook. We've got three colleagues here. We've got Caroline Hurst, who is Facebook's Safety Policy Programs Manager for Europe, Middle East and Africa. We've also got David Miles here, who is a real great friend of the Safer Internet Forum. I'm sure many of you know him from previous roles and previous sort of times when he's spoken in the past. And he's the Safety Policy Director for Europe, Middle East and Africa. And we're also delighted that we have Maria Lopez Caracoles, I hope I've said that correctly, who is the Public Policy Manager in Facebook's Connectivity and Access Policy team. So, you know, playing to both parts of what we're trying to do in the Safer Internet Forum this year, looking at child safety online, but also accessibility and inclusivity. So you're really welcome, colleagues from Facebook. Thank you so much for joining us. And I think we're passing to Caroline first. I hope that's right.
Thanks, Carl. I'm going to pass over to my esteemed leader, Dave Miles, actually. So Dave Miles, if you'd like to take it away. Maria, are you able to share the presentation? Is that all right?
Yeah, sure. Give me 1 second.
Great. Thanks, Caroline.
Can you see that full screen? No, I have to. Can you see that?
Yeah, that's
okay.
Great.
Excellent.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Well, firstly, I'd like to thank Carl, Hans, and the Better Internet for Kids team for inviting Facebook to be part of this year's event. I also want to acknowledge, given COVID, how much work must have gone into putting an event together like this, albeit virtually. So thank you very much. This is my 9th Safer Internet Forum. I remember the very first one in 2004, and I was reflecting on this earlier on, and you know, then the concept, for example, of an iPad with a haptic interface would have just been revolutionary. And back in 2004, that really was a world away, as indeed was Facebook. It still was a few years away from being created. So how things have changed. And in that 16 years, you know, the change has been dramatic in terms of the accessibility of products. And I'm sure that the next 16 years will do the same. I just also want to acknowledge the European Commission's foresight, really. I remember I was checking back through my notes, and in 2005, in the second one, we were discussing exactly these issues. And the European Commission has taken a huge leadership role in establishing things like Safer Internet Day, which actually the US did not follow for another 9 years, and generally just take a leadership role in trying to make this a really important issue. So for me, this is a key date in the calendar, and I thank you for inviting me. So as head of safety for Europe, Middle East and Africa, connecting people is fundamental to Facebook. And it's why we want our users to be safe across Facebook's family of apps, which include Instagram, WhatsApp, and Facebook. And it's also why accessibility and providing resources to those that are vulnerable or have special needs is really vital. I'm delighted that both my Facebook colleagues, Caroline and Maria, are going to share some of their exciting work in this important area. And I'll hand over to Caroline now to start.
Thanks, Dave. If I could have the next slide, please, that would be great. Hi, everyone. It's so nice, but a bit weird to see you all virtually. Again, like David, I've been coming to the Safer Internet Forum. I don't think for as many years as him, but I'm not too far behind. So I really miss seeing you all in person, absolutely. Again, I'd just like to also thank our friends from LEGO as well, and hearing from David from the RNIB. I just thought that was a really exciting and inspiring way of how we can really use platforms for good, and ensuring that accessibility really is at the heart of what companies are doing, which was really, really exciting for us to hear about. We're taking a kind of under the same vein as well, and under the work of the safety team. I wanted to tell you a little bit about my role and what I do. I work very closely with David and the rest of the global safety team at Facebook, and I run all of our programs in Europe, Middle East and Africa. Over the last few years, we've been really fortunate to be able to work with some amazing partners in the UK and also in the Netherlands as well, to ensure that we have programs that fulfill the needs that are accessible, and that also help children specifically with special educational needs. And I know some of my friends and colleagues are on the call today and at the conference, so the partners who I'll be talking about, you might be able to catch up with them later on in the Safer Internet Forum. But a few programs which we've done recently is we've worked very closely with ChildNet, an NGO in the UK, on their STAR Toolkit. And their STAR Toolkit is for educators working with young people who have autism. So we've been supporting them with that project, which is now in its second phase, which will be launching at the end of the year. We've also been working very closely with Internet Matters in the UK, working on Connecting Safely Online, which we launched earlier this year together with them. Connecting Safely Online is a hub directed for young people and their parents, again, for children with special educational needs. But I think what you'll find with these programs, and again, depending on which region you're calling in from, we clearly know that in the UK, there is a huge gap in online safety provision for children and adults with special educational needs in particular. So this is kind of one small step in helping to fill that gap. And again, I don't want to speak on behalf of ChildNet and Internet Matters, so please do connect with them later on if you'd like to know a little more. The final programme I'd like to just briefly mention, my Dutch isn't up to scratch, so I'm not even going to try and butcher it, but I didn't want to translate it because I thought of the very international audience that we have today. But we work closely with our Dutch public policy team here at Facebook to create a guide for adults with special educational needs on the subject of sexting. This title, kind of when you translate it, it talks about handling sexting and social media. So I just wanted to draw your attention to that as well, of some work that we've done in this space. If I could have the next slide, please, Maria. And just the final thing I want to end on before I hand over to Maria is just to highlight our Facebook safety page, where you can find lots of our resources, as well as advice and tips and conversation starters for parents and for youth. And you can find lots of the information that I spoke about just now there as well. So that's everything from the safety team for now. We're going to hand over to Maria, who's going to talk to you a little bit more about accessibility, but Dave and I will stick around if any of you have any specific questions later on. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Caroline. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure for me to be here today. It is actually the first time I'm joining the Safer Internet Forum with my colleagues, Caroline and Dave. So it is great to have the opportunity to guide you and walk you through what we are doing at Facebook to promote accessibility on our platform. Maybe before I jump into the slides and the presentation itself, a bit also about my background. As said by Carl, my name is Maria Lopez, and Carl, you pronounce super well the second surname, which is not evident. I work on the connectivity policy team at Facebook. There, my role focuses on audiovisual and telecommunications regulation. But also a part of this role, what I do is to support the accessibility team at Facebook from a policy perspective with a European footprint. So my role involves advising the company and this accessibility team about policy issues, about regulation, and the European Accessibility Act was mentioned in the previous section. And also, as I see it, part of what I do is to take feedback from discussions as the one we are having today to guide, to inform our work around accessibility, so we can get improving on what we do. So probably most of you are quite aware of Facebook apps, Facebook suite of services. They've mentioned that before. What we do is essentially to connect people. So the idea of our service is to allow interactions amongst users. And for us, that means connecting everyone. So this is our approach to accessibility. What we mean is regardless of the disability or of the ability of users, we really want people to be able to enjoy the interactions that are happening on Facebook, to benefit from the information that is being shared, so that they really can enjoy an equitable or equivalent experience on Facebook. So I'm aware that we are today talking, or we've been talking today about young people, about the safety of minors. Here, a bit of a caveat. When we talk about accessibility and everyone, we don't really look at the age of the user. We focus more on the type of disability that some people might experience with accessing our services at Facebook. So, and again, with the aim and the ambition of making everyone included, making everyone feel included on the platform. And I wanted to give you some numbers to give an idea of how accessibility is fundamental to our mission and to our work. We know that 1 in 10 people use the zoom or the magnified functionality when using the web version of Facebook. And 1 in 5 people increase the font size when using the mobile app. And these are really staggering numbers if we think about the scale of Facebook services, which are serving at the moment 2.7 billion people around the world. So this means that potentially hundreds of millions of people either need or choose to use some type of accessibility tool or functionality when accessing our services. So accessibility is something critical to getting mission right, and this is something that we really take very seriously. And we understand, we recognize that the space of disability is vast, is complex. So we understand that there is no one-size-fits-all solution to this challenge. How we are facing these within Facebook, we have a dedicated accessibility team that is focusing on making the platform more accessible. What they do is to try to understand how the different types of disability, vision loss, hearing loss, motor disabilities or learning disabilities such as the dyslexia. So what they're trying to do is to understand how these different types of disability influence the interaction of those people with our platform, and trying to bring specific solutions to those problems. But we don't look at this just from one team. what we really do and try to do, as was mentioned by David before, is we try to build accessibility by design. So we look at accessibility from a real horizontal way and trying to embed accessibility into the life cycle of our product. So all the teams involved in the product design, in research, engineering, they have the accessibility angle into consideration. And of course, we have the legal teams supporting and policy teams, such as the one I'm working with. And we, as we want to see this, we understand that given the complexity of the challenge and the whole range of products that we have, we like to say that this is just the beginning of a journey. We really understand that we need to improve. There is always room to improve. So there is a continuous effort that we are doing to make Facebook services more accessible. And now, what do we do then to make the platform more accessible? Of course, we are a tech company. We like technology. So much of what we do at the moment is to leverage artificial intelligence to be able to bring innovation and to be able to build these accessible tools for people with disabilities. I will walk you through the main milestone of the main features that we have built to make this possible. One is captioning. So captioning, it means adding text to the video content. Since long, Facebook has allowed the creators of videos to attach manually captioning, closed captionings to the videos they are creating. What we are doing now is to invest in technology on two fronts: real-time captioning and automated captioning. So we realized, of course, that real-time, so live content is more and more prominent on the platform. So what we are working in is to make real-time captionings possible. So we allow now Facebook streamers to add through an inserter tool or through a third vendor party to add manually to real-time captioning. And where our bet now is about leveraging artificial intelligence for the generation of automatic captioning. Here, we understand that one of the main challenges with captioning is that it is costly, it is time consuming. So the average user or small companies, it's difficult that they will add captioning to the videos. So, and we wanted to make really, we wanted to increase the number of videos with captioning available on the platform. So that's why we are using technology to generate automatically this captioning. So this feature is really easy to use. The captions are generated with a press of a button and can be reviewed for accuracy by the creators. Now the feature has for some time been available for in multiple languages on videos and on pages and video ads. And now we have recently launched this automatic captioning for Facebook Live and Instagram TV. And knowing that Instagram is probably much more interesting for young people than Facebook at this moment. This is about videos helping people with hearing disabilities to understand the content of video. But we are also working on promoting accessibility of pictures for people this time with visual impairments, with blindness. So what we are doing here is, again, to use technology, to use machine learning and artificial intelligence, AI, to generate descriptions of pictures of when people access them using screen readers on Facebook. So we have two main tools here. These are called automatic alt text and face recognition. Automatic alt text, what it does is generates an automatic description of the objects and the actions that appear on the picture using object recognition. And face recognition, what it does is telling the people using the screen reader whose friends appear on the picture, even if they haven't been tagged. And of course, this has been, this requires that the people allows or enables the face recognition tool under the settings. What's a bit of, I mean, to tell you about the challenge that we are trying to face or to address here, you can imagine the amount of pictures that are uploaded every day on Facebook. The traditional mechanism that is used to describe a picture is alt text. But that requires, again, as with the captioning, it requires the uploader, the creator of the picture, to add manually that description to the picture. And again, this is time consumer, and we know that it is an uncommon practice. So we have provided this technology to, again, increase the number of pictures with some type of this description, which is automatically generated. So to increase the number of pictures with some type of description available. So before this automatic alt text tool, when a user came upon a picture without alt text attached to it, they could hear, this is a picture. So now with AAT, they can really understand what is appearing on the picture. It is able now to recognize more or less 100 objects, and as said before, it is recognizing actions such as people is smiling. And this is available both on Facebook, but also since very recently on Instagram. And I will share a video to show you how this AAT functions. I hope it will work. And then I will continue. There we go. Call if there is any problem, please. Sorry.
So we could hear it perfectly, Maria, but it didn't seem to be moving.
Sorry, because yeah.
Friends 937. News.
1 second, because it just
no problem.
Yeah, it just went into YouTube tightly, so that's why I think you cannot see it. Oh, yeah, something went wrong, Carl.
No worries. And of course, colleagues will realize that when we tested this, Maria, it worked perfectly, didn't it, yesterday?
Yeah, it's always with technology, right? It works when you're testing it, and then it doesn't work.
Of course.
Maybe I can just try again. No, but I cannot see the link here. I can share.
Yeah, I was going to say, one of my technical colleagues is telling me that it's perhaps because you're sharing the PowerPoint and not the screen if you've actually gone to YouTube. But I think if we can't get it to...
I can try then to... I will end the presentation, sharing the presentation, and I will go to YouTube.
And we can always share the link afterwards as well, Maria, so...
Yes, sorry.
No.
This is always so difficult. 1 second, bear with me. Let's try again. And then I will stop share this, and I will share the YouTube link. Let's see if like that it will work. Is it working?
It is, yeah.
Okay.
O-O-N-N-G-G. Friends 937. Newsfeed. Lindsay Russell updated her cover photo yesterday at 10:29 p.m. This image may contain outdoor, cloud, foliage, flattened, tree. This image may contain 6 people, child, close up, like, one or more people, jewelry, smiling, 19 likes, 3 comments like.
Now I can see the picture in my head. Like, yeah, you shouldn't have been that close up. Like, now I can say it.
Oh, I love it. You have no idea. This is amazing.
That whole saying of pictures being worth 1,000 words, I think it's true, but unless you have somebody to describe it to you, even having like 3 words just helps flesh out all the details that I can't see. That makes me feel like included and like I'm a part of it too.
I can just call my mom like, yay, I seen your picture. And she'll be like, what? She was like, how you see it? Because my phone read it to me. It's new. I seen it.
I feel like I can fit in. There's more I can do.
And I'm gonna mess with my mother head so much. I'm so glad.
So I'm moving again to the presentation. So that was how AAT and face recognition works. So we're really excited with this functionality. We are quite proud of it. So, and we hope that people with visual loss are enjoying it. And then last point I wanted to share with you about how we use technology. This is a product that might be less familiar to people. Facebook has a line of virtual reality devices, which is called Oculus. So this is virtual reality. And we are really excited, and we are excited about this product in any way, but we are also excited about the potential for virtual reality to improve the lives of people with disabilities. There is a lot of discussion going on about how this emerging technology can help people with disabilities. One of the practical examples that we have at the moment in place is the Anna Frank VR experience. So this experience allows people, it allows anyone to have access to the annex where Anna Frank was hiding during World War II. But especially for people with motor disabilities, they can really, it's open up this experience in an immersive way to more and more people. So really excited about this and the potential. And that was a bit about technology, but not everything about accessibility that we do is about technology. Awareness raising was mentioned by the previous speakers and through the Q&A. We really think that this is part of what we should do to promote more accessible content on our platform. So it's not just about people with disabilities understanding what is available and how they can use our platform, but it's also educating the average user on how to make their post in a way that they are accessible for people with different types of disabilities. Earlier this year in May, we produced an infographic with easy to understand tips about how to make posts on Instagram and Facebook more accessible, with tips such as the use of simple language or how to make your hashtags better for people to understand, regardless of their ability. And with these awareness raising initiatives, we are organizing later this month, on the 30th of November, we're organizing a hackathon with students. So they will be able to present an accessible initiative or products jury composed of Facebook and other advocacy orgs and European Commission. So we are really excited about this initiative, and this is part of what we are trying to do in Europe to raise awareness about how important accessibility is. Also, we wanted to highlight the importance of user feedback. So as we said before, we try really to have accessibility by design on what we do. And as part of that, we really believe that we need to involve people with disabilities in the design of the products. There are some examples of that. One of the latest examples that we have run is a 9-day visit in Brazil to understand how people with hearing disabilities were interacting with social media. And it was very interesting. The main takeaway of that visit was that many people were using Facebook to connect with friends using short clips with sign language. So this really informed our way of looking at video recording on our platforms, and it is guiding us to make hands-free recording possible, so people that really want to interact using sign language can easily do that. Also, we think that if we, and I think it was mentioned before, if we really want to build accessible products, we need an inclusive and diverse workforce that is reflecting the complexity that we find in society in terms of ability and of disability. So we have special programs in place to support candidates and to support employees at Facebook, so they can be part of our workforce. And finally, wanted also to share with you the Text Access Initiative. This is an initiative that we have co-founded with other tech companies, with advocacy groups and academia in the US. Is not available yet in Europe, but hopefully it will be at some point. This tech initiative, what it aims doing is to promote accessibility in higher education, because we realized that accessibility is not part of computer science or of the design degrees at university. So with the idea and the ambition to make the new technology, the future technology being born accessible, we have co-founded this initiative. One of the outcomes of it is to the elaboration of online tutorials that are distributed to students of computer science, so they can understand accessibility challenges, and they take the accessibility angle when developing software. So I think that's it, what I wanted to share with you. And now, of course, super happy to take any questions from the audience.
Maria, thank you so much. You've packed a lot of information there, and you possibly didn't see, but lots of really positive comments about that video, and we did share the link to it. I think that was really, really powerful. What I'm going to try and do now, I'm going to put somebody on the spot. Kat, who is one of our colleagues from the UK Safer Internet Centre, has made a couple of comments in the chat, and I don't know whether Kat is able to unmute her microphone. I've given her permission to do that, and she may not even have, audio connectivity, in which case I will read out her questions. But Kat, if you're still there and if you can hear me, you should be able to unmute your mic now, and perhaps you can just sort of talk about some of those issues around neurodiversity that you mentioned. This may not work, and if it doesn't work, I will read out Kat's questions. And it's looking as though she can't unmute, the joys of technology, but it was worth a try. One of the things that Kat said Maria, was, are there any plans for making the platform more accessible to neurodiverse people? And she also says further down, the captions and alt text initiatives have been around for quite a while. Are there any more recent examples of Facebook tools to make the platform more accessible to those who identify as neurodiverse? I hope that makes sense.
Thanks for the question. It's a really good question. As I said, we understand that this space is really of disabilities is really broad, and as I said during the presentation, we are focusing at the moment on making pictures and videos more accessible for people with hearing loss and visual loss. But this is not that. It doesn't mean that we are not investigating on how to make the platform more accessible for people with other types of disabilities. So this accessibility team I mentioned before are constantly looking into how to make products accessible for people with cognitive and learning disabilities. So when she mentioned the captioning, it's true that captioning has been there for some time now. And what we are doing at the moment is really investing in making that captioning more available. And, for example, for real-time video, we didn't have captioning before. And from working hard on having automatic captioning, so people don't need to care about adding their own captioning, or covering or filling that gap left by users who choose not to add the captions to their videos. For neurodiverse people, the answer is that we are constantly working on that, and happy to take, I'm taking this feedback back to the accessibility team, but they are fully aware that this is something that we need to address. Part of the infographic that I mentioned before, also because awareness raising is very important, is to make users understand that people with cognitive or other types of learning disabilities, they're reading their post and they might have difficulties in understanding their post. So we are encouraging creators to make those posts in a way that it is understandable for everyone, including people with cognitive disabilities. But neurodiversity is part of what we take into account for future plans. Yeah, it is part of our approach to accessibility, even if we are working a bit now or prioritizing hearing and vision loss.
Thank you, Maria, and thanks, Kat, for the question. We've got a few other comments. We have one here from June, and she says, does Facebook have any experience from their reading and intellectual disability team? Example, around explaining terms and conditions, things like that could offer text suitable for different reading levels.
So yeah, it is a great question again. One part of what we do is, of course, facilitating access to what others post on our platform. And something that we do is also work on our own content. So to make our own website and the navigation of the apps easy and easy for people with disabilities. So yes, so the answer is that we keep working on making that more and more accessible. This year, actually, we have renovated the full website of Facebook, and we have used that opportunity to really make it more accessible, allow a better interaction with screen readers, for example, and to ensure that the text that is included there can be understandable by anyone, regardless of ability. And again, we always have on the website, we have a report form, so people can flag to us if there is any part of the website or any functionality of our services that they think is not accessible to them. So they flag that to us and we work to fix it.
Thank you, Maria. I'm going to give you a short break here. There is another question for you, but I'm going to pass to Caroline, if that's okay. There was one specifically for her. Caroline, the question is there an English version of the Dutch project that you worked on around adults and sexting? Kat says, as you know, sometimes adults find themselves on the edge of criminal justice system, because of inappropriate oversharing, repetitive messages. And a lot of this is down to not understanding or reading social cues correctly. So she's asking, does that resource look into that sort of behavioural challenge? And is there an English version?
Great question. Yeah, thanks, Kat. So what was really unique about the Dutch Sexting Guide that we launched together with the Dutch Public Policy team is that it was organic in the sense that we wrote it directly with a Dutch partner who understood the needs of this, and it was a real key policy priority due to the law and other terms that were very, very unique to the Netherlands. So there isn't an English version of the guide, and in my kind of honest kind of programs safety expertise opinion, I don't think we should translate the Dutch version into an English version to speak to a UK audience. What I would love to do instead is think directly what it is that is affecting adults here in the UK, if that's particularly the country that you wanted to specifically talk about and that what needed support, because one of my jobs is to, yes, I launch global programs kind of globally. So sorry, that doesn't make any sense. I launch global programs kind of more localized. So I might launch a US program in the UK, for example, or in France or in Spain, absolutely. But one of the other things I do is I make sure that we are creating organic programs that definitely fit the need and fill a gap directly for that purpose. And I think, interestingly, when I spoke to the Dutch public policy team, I had questions around criminalisation and kind of my knowledge here in the UK and other European countries. And I think because it differs so much depending on country to country, and this is, the most perfect forum to talk about that, I would want to do something that was more unique to that country. And I know you folk at the Southwest Grid for Learning have adapted your So You Got Naked Online for young people with special educational needs. That's been a key interest of ours, particularly since one of our kind of safety pillars at the moment is vulnerable communities and those communities with additional needs. So I would love to chat to you more about that and think about what's needed offline. But yeah, great question. And no plans to translate that one into English, but that's not to say that we don't need one.
Thank you very much, Caroline, and thank you to colleagues who are posting really, really useful links into the chat. Claire Levens from Internet Matters, for example, talking about the connecting safely online hub that was done in collaboration with Facebook as well. So it's really worth looking at. We're almost out of time, but I did say I was going to come back to this one last question for Maria, if that's okay. It's quite a specific question. It's from one of our colleagues, Rena, who is based in India, I believe, and works with the sort of Bodini sort of awareness raising center. And she says, is it true that when vernacular languages are typed in with English alphabets, the AI struggles to deal with that? And is that something that you're working on, particularly perhaps in relation to abusive content?
That's a super interesting question. To be honest, I'm not aware of this specific challenge, but this is something that I'm super happy to get back to the accessibility team. But more generally, it's true that making all the tools available in multiple languages is a real challenge. So we are working little by little to make it more pervasive in that perspective. I said before, for example, the automatic captioning is working now in 6 languages, and we really appreciate that. This is a lot. This is covering a great deal of our users, but of course it's not enough, and we need to get improving. And of course the AI systems need a lot of training, so it is easier for them to work with languages which are broader, and for smaller languages it's more of a challenge. But this is something that as far as I know, is something that the accessibility team is very much aware of. But I will pass this message about the vernacular languages, because I wasn't aware of this, but it's a super interesting and valid question.
Thank you so much, Maria. And colleagues, we're out of time. The hour and a half has just gone so quickly. I'd like to thank all of the panelists. So David and Stina, who talked, about Lego and the work that RNIB is doing, and also Maria and Dave and Caroline for sharing some of the insights about things that Facebook are doing. And I know some of those will have been familiar to some of you, but I'm sure that they were new and interesting to hear about to others. I think, in sort of summing up, I think that there's common threads that are appearing across the 2 days now that we've had of the Safer Internet Forum 2020. I think we're hearing very clearly that there is no one-size-fits-all solution, and that was really something that Laura sort of emphasized this morning in the keynote. And I think we always have to have that front of mind. I think also, listening to Maria there's always room to improve. There's always more that we can do. And I think, going back to some of the things that that David and Stina said, I think that idea of, inclusivity and accessibility as well as safety by design is so important. So thank you for today, colleagues. I hope you found it a useful session this afternoon. There is more to come tomorrow. So we have a second deep dive that starts at 10 o'clock Central European time. And we're going to be focusing there on some of the existing and also planned resources, particularly from the InSafe network of safer internet centres, which are designed to help children and young people with diverse disabilities to stay safe online. Caroline from Facebook there mentioned the STAR resource that was initially developed by ChildNet, who are part of the UK Safer Internet Centre, but equally that has been sort of taken on and moved further forward by colleagues in the Belgian Safer Internet Centre as well. So there'll be more on that tomorrow morning. And then again tomorrow afternoon at 2 o'clock, a session, a deep dive on inclusive education. So we do hope that you can join us for some of those. Thank you so much again to the panelists for today, but thank all of the attendees as well for your participation and your interest. Have a good rest of the day, and we will see you back here tomorrow morning. Thank you.